Here.
Planning Commissioner R. Smith,
Here.
Chairman Maloney.
Here.
Thank you, Cindy. We are missing our staff. All right, let's do announcements.
It's kind of an announcement. It's directed at council, but it's convenient that this group is here. I finally had an opportunity to look at the multiple pages for the, whatever that thing was we approved the other night, that had the engineering notes on it. And
St.
there it
Scholastic.
is. I would just direct to our administrator that I fail to understand why a font style is relevant on an engineering plan. I probably need to be educated on the technicalities of that, if you could have that done, please. If not, those comments that are interpretive or personal need to stay out of those plans. I think that's ludicrous that we would tell an architect or an engineer that he's using the wrong font for a page number.
I'll get you some information.
Any other announcements from council or planning commission members? All right, well then, let's go ahead and turn our time over to Dina.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you. So before we start, can I just get a tally? So the packets were emailed out Friday to Planning Commission members. They were hand-delivered to members of council on Friday morning with the budget book. How many members of council found the packet for tonight's meeting in the materials that were delivered on Friday?
But we're quick learners.
Yeah, I just pulled it up on the website before that, so I just,
So let me ask a different question. How many have had a chance to review the packet?
I looked through it.
We'll be all right,
All right.
because we trust you.
And I think I left my copy up in the printer, so if I have to refer to it. So this is the third work session on the riverfront zone districts, having a joint session again with Planning Commission and council members. So per the previous two sessions, this is organized into 3 general areas. And that is first doing a quick recap of where we've been the last 2 meetings. Secondarily, we will focus a little bit more attention tonight on signs because some of that material we were not able to get through in the past meeting. And then the third item is the comprehensive review of the information. So first on the quick recap, and I'll try to go even quicker than last time. So we know we're doing this because this is a next step element to the Arkansas River Corridor Master Plan, and it's about revitalizing the riverfront in the city of Canyon City. So how are we doing this? We're creating 2 new zone districts, again, the tool in the toolbox. So we're creating riverfront mixed-use zone language and riverfront residential zone language. And the idea is that this effort is providing a more user-friendly approach to a code document. So this will be within Title 17 of the city's municipal code and generally can be applied between 1st and 11th Streets. So again, as we've talked about before, we're creating the written regulations, or Part A, not actually going through and changing the zoning map anywhere within the city. So this effort is focused on the written regulations. So I'm not going to walk through each one of these. We've been through the purpose and intent statements. We've had a couple of comments on them. I'm going to point out one thing to note on that is the second to last intent statement we have added. In looking at everything comprehensively, we really realized, a key part of this effort is also expanding the Riverwalk, and so we wanted to have an intent statement in there in regards to that. So in terms of the area of applicability, we know that of approximately 5.5 miles abutting the riverfront, this really is applying to less than 1 mile of that frontage of the Arkansas River within the city boundaries. And of about 8,000 acres of land within the city limits, the mixed-use districts could potentially apply to about 50 acres, and the residential to about 20 acres. So Just for reference, that 50 acres is literally about 0.6% of the entire acreage of the city. So again, in terms of the organization, it's organized as the current Title 17 is. Article 1 is general provisions. Article 2 is districts and regulations. Article 3 is development standards. So now moving on to the second part of the conversation for this evening. So we started the sign conversation a little bit last month, and so I'm going to repeat a little bit of this because we went through it pretty quickly at the end of the last meeting. There's really 5 areas how we've organized the proposed sign code for this section of our city. We've clarified and added definitions. We've included rules of measurement. We have regulations by category and type, then by district, and then some general regulatory components. And again, all of this is trying to create a sign code that is focused on time, place, and manner based on the Supreme Court ruling of a few years ago. And there was just another district ruling I saw that came down recently regarding signs. So we may need to amend some more. So if somebody is coming in and wants to apply for a sign permit, the first thing that they would do is identify or pick the category and the type of sign that they want to install. So let's say that they wanted to do a wall sign. So the first thing is to pick the category and the type. You'll see how we have it organized to make it very user-friendly, that they can very quickly see whether they need a permit or not for that type of sign. Then they can identify the district they're in and look at those regulations, and then get into design of the sign. So focusing in a little bit on category and type. In terms of categories, there's 3 main categories of signs. There's permanent, portable, and temporary. So 3 different categories of signs. Within the permanent signs, moving into that, there are 7 types, right? So we're going from a category of sign to a type of sign within a category. So there are 7 types of permanent signs that we've addressed in this draft code language. The first 6 are, sort of the typical signs that somebody might come in and apply for in a commercial or mixed-use setting in the city. Some of the things that we're familiar with in terms of awning signs, directional, monument, projecting, wall, and window signs. So what we've done in terms of the organization, and this is in here to come back to when we need to for conversation, but I'm not going to go through all of these to get through this. So, but in terms of the organization, first the tables are organized by category, then by type. Then you can check if you need a permit. And then lastly, within that table by type, you can look at the regulations by sign type. So the idea is that they're laid out in tables and hopefully a bit more user-friendly to folks. So this table shows the information for awning, directional, and monument. The table continues and has the information for projecting, wall, and window signs. And then the last category of what we're talking about as a permanent sign is murals. And we know that murals are important in the community in terms of allowing them and having creative, basically creative murals in our community. The challenges based on the Supreme Court ruling is how do we allow them to happen and allow a wall sign that could potentially be painted on as well that's then associated with a business. And so we're trying to make a distinction between those two. And one of the ways, or 2 of the ways that we're making that distinction of what a mural is when you look at the other conditions, the 3rd bullet there, if it's proposed to be within a historic or on a designated historic structure, that must be approved by the Historic Preservation Commission. And that's something that is in the works right now as a next step to the CLG that was formulated last year. So that mechanism will be in place. And then the last bullet there is talking about having an arts district or or committee that's formed, and I know there's been perhaps some loose conversation about potentially putting in place again an arts council within the community, and that group could potentially review those mural signs in that case. So then we're moving into the second category, which is portable signs. And there's two types of portable signs, flag and sandwich boards. Again, it's organized by table, so you have the information for those here, and sandwich boards. And then the third type of sign is temporary signs, or I should say category of signs, are temporary signs. And those are really 6 different types of signs. So there's the feather flags that we're familiar with, there's flagging, streamers, and pennants, there's flexible banner signs, inflatable signs, rigid banner signs, and yard signs. And so again, those are organized by type within the table. So one thing to note on the permanent signs, all of the permanent signs require a permit. The portable signs, we are not requiring permits for. And then within the temporary signs, you'll see a mix of some that we do want a permit for and some that we're allowing to occur without a permit. And that's indicated again in that last column in the table. So this is just the table information for the flexible banner signs, inflatable signs, rigid banner sign, and yard signs.
Dina,
Yep.
how do you differentiate, or how did you differentiate between the flag and the feather?
The feather flag signs are usually installed in the ground and
Okay.
have specific dimensions that are identified. So it talks about the dimensions that are allowed are that typical form of a feather flag
Right.
versus, say, your
Fundamentally-
American flag that hangs off the wall has different dimensions that are allowed.
My personal opinion is let's don't complicate it too much.
Yeah, through this effort, we're trying to make it as clear as possible and really separate and differentiate that you wanting to put your flag up on your building, your American flag, we're not going to ask for permits for that. We're just going to allow that to occur. Versus the feather flags, we want to make sure that we're identifying some regulations around time, place, and manner, such that, say, they don't get installed or stuck in a vision triangle within the public right-of-way and things like that.
Nina, can I ask a question? Way over here.
Yep.
Those feather flags, those are the ones that are waving, right? They're on the,
They're,
that one
yeah,
right there.
they're usually in the ground.
It says other conditions are only displayed during hours of operation. That's not feasible. People aren't going to take those out every night.
Okay.
I know they're built
So-
to because they have a stake in the ground. We have some, but just to be reasonable, nobody's going to go out there at 5 o'clock and take the sign out and then bring it back.
I have seen businesses do that.
I have seen them not do that as well.
They take them out.
So are we going to fine them? What's going to be the
Well,
ordinance on
my
that?
question is, are we going to go through each of these signs and kind of dissect what, because, I mean, we can get hung up all day on feather signs, I have a question about window signs. Are we going to be able to go through this?
Yes,
and-
I was going to try to
Okay.
get through everything, and then we can take comments to go through everything specifically on the sign section, and then the overall summary of everything in terms of the proposed regulations.
Okay, thank you.
So, okay, so we went through temporary. Come on. So we talked about the different signs in terms of category and type. Then the next item is to talk about the regulations per district. So just like the sign regulations that we currently have in place are both for our commercial areas and then for residential areas, we're splitting that out here as well. So again, if you're picking the category and type that you would like to install, you're checking that table to see if a permit is needed. The next step that somebody would do in that process is figure out what district they're in, because there's additional regulations in terms of overall square footage of signage based on the district. So starting with the mixed-use district, again, now they're split out by, I'm going to try to use the mouse. So within the mixed-use district, again, we have the category of sign, and that's permanent. The next column in this particular table then goes to type. So it's saying if you are in the mixed-use district and you would like to put a permanent sign up, these are the types of permanent signs that are allowed. And then the additional regulations around that in terms of the number of the number of signs rather, and the size of those signs. The table then goes to the portable category. And, it jumped ahead. And then the last part, the top table you see there, is the continuation in terms of regulations on the category of temporary signs, and then talking about how murals are handled. There's also a table then in each of the mixed-use districts that talks about prohibited signs. So the types of signs that we do not want to see in that particular district. And so those are listed in the table. So then the other district, obviously, that we have here is the residential district. And again, the table is organized in terms of the permanent signs, the portable signs, and the temporary signs, and then the prohibited signs. And the regulations here are very much in line with what already exists within our current code for residential areas. And that is that they're basically accommodating a small sign for home-based businesses, home occupations. So then just to touch briefly on the rules of measurement. This is actually organized in terms of the location in the proposed language. It's at the very beginning to have sort of a cheat sheet for folks to design their signs. So we are identifying what's included, what's not included in those sign calculations. So for instance, on the bottom there, we're saying that if you have a monument sign, we're not going to account a certain amount of that base in terms of the overall allotted square footage. So that square footage is more so allotted to the sign itself. So we're just trying to clarify that by having a graphic and that language in the code. The second list here that you see is also part of the rules of measurement, and this speaks to, how do you measure a sign, right? We've had some questions about that, and not only to make it easier for applicants, but also for staff when they're reviewing applications that may come in. So that's the information that you see here. For instance, on the bottom component here, we want to make it very clear that we're a double-faced sign. So say it's a projecting sign coming out of a building. A lot of times those signs have information on both sides. So we're counting that in terms of the total number of signs as one sign, but in terms of the maximum square footage allowed, we're including each side of the sign to add up to that total. So that's how we're splitting it out and identifying that.
So it would be equivalent to somebody having a flat sign on the front of their building, but taking one half and one half and putting it together?
So that would be a wall sign. So if somebody had a wall sign applied to their building, so say it's the picture behind you is applied to the building, then whatever the dimensions, that area of that picture is the area that's calculated for your sign.
Can I ask a question?
Is that a standard procedure for that? Is that standard?
It's what a lot of communities do and what I'm familiar with.
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
What brought about 3 pages dealing with signs and regulations? Did something happen along the way with a business or anything like that, that all of a sudden we got 3 pages dealing with strictly different kinds of signs and different locations and all this other stuff? Just like you said, we could spend probably more than one day if we wanted to go there. What I'm looking at, was there something specifically that came out through whatever the code enforcement and this and that brought out 3 pages dealing with signs?
So I think what we're trying to do in terms of the intent statements for the riverfront area is to create a very unique environment within the city. And there's been conversations within staff over the last couple of years, and actually prior to my arrival, one of the items on the to-do list was to review the current sign code. And so with creation of the riverfront zoning, which is, again, not being applied unless somebody comes in and asks to rezone to that district, this wouldn't apply. But if it did apply, then we're allowing sign regulations that are calibrated to the scale and type of development and flavor that we're trying to create along the river.
So,
I'm sure a sign, oh, I'm sorry.
so the part of what we're doing here, I mean, in essence, we've got a blank slate, and we're trying to fill in whatever designs, whatever colors, whatever, features that we want on that blank slate. We know, as we've tried to deal with signs here as council, that when residents are used to a certain type of condition, that then trying to change it is like, oh my goodness, it's the end of the world trying to talk about changes to what people are accustomed to. And I think it's important to keep in mind that what we're trying to do here, we've got a blank slate, we're trying to fill it in so that we have, this is going to be tightly controlled, and you don't get to tight control without a lot of words.
I think Dolly was next.
But there's
Oh,
one
sorry,
other
go
thing, and Dina, if you could, would you tell us a little bit about how you, where these standards come from? I mean, you just didn't pick them out of thin air. There's reasons why these types of things are appropriate for a particular district. Can you fill us in on some of the reasons why that is?
So one of, so the information, I mean, getting to the content that's here today is a combination of other code examples, my experience working in other communities or other developments, private developments, doing some testing, actually looking at, hey, this is a linear footage of a building, and now let's do the worst case scenario, and how many signs can we have, and what does that look like, and getting to a sort of happy medium, really. We know that, so for instance, right now, the current sign code in the community is sort of a one-size-fits-all, and that, the character of Main Street is very different than the character out by Walmart, right? And the size of those buildings and the size of the parcels and the speed of the traffic going by some of that signage is very different on US 50 than, say, folks driving down Main Street. And in this context of the riverfront, most of the speed of the vehicles will be probably about 25 miles per hour. And we also know that we're trying to create a very vibrant pedestrian environment here. And so a lot of those signs will be viewed from a pedestrian standpoint going 3 miles per hour, or perhaps on a bike going, 8 miles per hour. So those are some of the reasons. And yes, I think your comment on starting from a clean slate. So having that new sign code tied to the zoning regulations, so that when that new development comes in, we can assure that the riverfront in Canyon City is a great place.
Okay, Dolly, do you still have a comment?
Well, both of you kind of said what I wanted to say, but I also, with the clean slate, we want to make sure that we get it right, because 10 years down the road, we don't want to be changing our sign codes. Signs are very expensive to change. And if somebody comes in with a new business, we don't want to have them change it. So I just want to make sure that we're really looking at it and getting it right the first time.
And Councilmember Meisner.
So as I'm understanding, we would have a portion of 17 that's signed for the river zoned area. Is that correct?
Right, so going back in terms of the entire organization of this effort, of the creation of the riverfront zoning, that's going to be a brand-new chapter in Title 17 that will have the lot configurations, the setbacks that we've been talking through the last two sessions, and it will have the parking standards that we talked about last session, and it would have these sign regulations sitting in just within riverfront zoning. So just within that, about 50 acres and about 20 acres.
My concern is that we've been dealing with signs ever since I've been on council, and trying to get that changed, and knowing that that's a real challenge, that we develop a set of standards for the riverfront or river zone, and then at some point we come up with this stupendous idea that we've already got a sign code for the river code, let's just use it citywide. So I don't want to get into that premise that
Yeah.
we've gone through all this work to create a sign code, and now we're going to unilaterally apply it in another year and a half.
Right, and I wouldn't say that would be appropriate. In some of the initial conversations staff's had in terms of reviewing the existing code, I mean, part of the conversation has been about calibrating it to, say, a Main Street district or a downtown district
Okay.
versus a highway district.
Okay.
Right, so while I would say the approach in terms of the organization and
concept.
use of the code and the concept would remain and continue, hopefully, but obviously any further efforts would be calibrated to the district.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions at this time?
I have one on murals. So you talked about a committee. Will that committee differentiate the difference between the mural on Fifth Street, which is like a cowboy mural, versus the entire building on the corner of 15th and Royal Gorge?
So I am going to ask Catherine to answer that.
Well, I'll be honest, I'm not familiar with the murals you're talking about, so I'm a little
Okay.
at a loss there, but,
On 15th, there's an entire building.
It's the Mountain Wookiee sign.
Yeah.
Shows the big train.
oh, okay. So murals are, and I'm going to use the term works of art, although that doesn't appear here, and there's a reason why it doesn't appear in your regulations, but are works of art that have no commercial message. So, if it's just like the picture that Dina had up was just a work of art that wasn't related to any business or anything like that. So we treat painted wall signs that do have a commercial message as a wall sign. So
Okay.
just as a regular wall sign that you would put up.
Right.
So I don't know if that answers your question.
Can I chime in on that? I applied for a permit for a sign for our building, and they termed it a mural because it did not have any, it didn't have the name of our business or anything like that, and it was termed as a barn quilt. But everybody knows what a barn quilt is. So it has meaning to us, but as a work of art, it didn't name our business. Is that what you're kind of talking about as far as a mural? Because I applied for it and they termed it a mural.
Okay, so.
If not, I want my money back.
I mean, I think, yes, what you're getting at is that the reason why this doesn't say work of art is because under the Supreme Court case that Dina referred to, that becomes a subjective analysis.
Right.
Is that a work of art? Is it not a work of art? So what we simply do is say it doesn't have a commercial message. So if the sign you had didn't have any commercial message, and it doesn't have to be a commercial message related to your business, it could be a commercial message related to a different business, which is also a different type of sign, that's going to be treated differently. So if you want to, have a wall sign that, or paint it, it's actually just painted on, correct, Dina? Murals are just painted on.
The murals? Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's just a painted, non-commercial
Right.
sign. So.
Okay, but it reflects the business is what I'm getting at.
Well, not, and what do you mean it reflects the business?
Like I said, a barn quilt is just a work of art. It does not have our name or anything else, but everybody knows throughout the United States what a barn quilt is and what it represents.
Okay, I guess I don't. I'm sorry.
Come by and I'll show you.
Sorry, I
Okay,
apologize.
all right,
Well, we need to
I
probably-
understand, but
Probably keep it moving. I do want to ask, you had, Brenda, you had wanted to speak. Do you want to speak to us now, or do you want to wait till the end of our presentation, which could be a little bit lengthy? Yeah, let's go ahead. And please state your name.
Brenda Burkett, 1009 Beach Avenue. And thank you for the opportunity to speak. I haven't gone over the riverfront proposal in detail, I'll have to admit. But I would hope that our riverfront plan will not be like Pueblo with yards and yards of concrete and no shops at river level. Plus, it's much easier to walk on gravel than it is on concrete. It's easier on the knees than the legs. Number 2, Centennial Park is lovely. We use it, and I see it's heavily utilized, especially the splash pad. But I believe we've spent enough money there. Now, competing with Salida, it appears to me that the enthusiasm there is not just the riverfront and park, but the festivals and the retail and the restaurants. Canyon City has festivals too, and council has promised a more organized, uniform, and business-friendly city government. The downtown retail should reflect that going forward, and they should thrive. Do we need retail at the river now? It appears that we're going to be cannibalizing downtown to go across the river. And finally, we need a safe way to get across 50. I don't know, what is the status of the pedestrian bridge?
Well, we are studying and making up a plan right now for safe pedestrian crossing from 1st to 9th. And it's looking more like mini medians and not an actual bridge. That way there's multiple crossings across the highway.
A medium, I didn't hear you.
Little mini medians in the road that have safety, like safe spots to land in the middle. So there's a
They're
study
still going
that's
45
very
and 50
public.
miles, or 45 miles an hour when you're trying to get to Veterans Park. But thank you.
May I? We do have a stop sign or a stoplight and a crosswalk at 3rd Street.
Yes. But that's not,
Not what
there's a
you're
lot of
looking
people,
for?
when there's the festivals going on, people are moving back and forth between those stop signs.
So there is a public open house about that on November 6th at 5 to 7 p.m. And that'll be the perfect time for you to come and analyze the suggested improvements for crossing the highway and to give your comments that will be taken into consideration then.
Thank you.
Thank
Well,
you.
one of the other things that we had covered was that pedestrian bridge, which we would love to have. You're talking anywhere from $6 to $8 million. That's a lot of money. And yeah, if we had that, that'd be an excellent thing to do. Try to afford it. With other needs that we have. But it was a big number just for that bridge. It'd be great to have it.
All right, are we ready to get back on track? Okay.
That was
All right.
track.
Yeah, that was track, but we need to get back to the presentation. Thank you, Dina.
Okay, so that's a little bit of a summation in terms of the rules of measurement. So again, in terms of the 5 main categories within that sign language, it's about clarified new definitions, rules of measurement, having regulations by sign category and type, then by district, and then having general regulations. So Part C, so this is sort of a comprehensive review now of everything that we've gone through and talked over in the past 2 sessions and this session to date. So again, just to remind everybody, the organization, this is going to be in Title 17, Chapter 17, a new Chapter 18, so 17.18 is where it would be. And it would be, everything in that section would be riverfront zoning. And again, the outline of that is per our current code, 3 articles. The first article having general provisions, the second article having the districts and regulations, and then the third article having the development standards. So in terms of those general provisions, we've talked about the purpose and intent statements. We've talked about the general applicability of this being between 1st and 11th Streets, and having 2 framework plans, the mixed-use framework plan identified that's calibrating the sub-districts, and then a residential framework plan. In terms of the districts and regulations, Article 2, and now I've got information in here in the slides to come back to if we need to, so for now I'm just going to walk through it. So again, we talked through at that first work session some of the mixed-use lot standards, the building placement, and you've seen in your packets there were some graphics that we had during the discussions and the conversations. So the graphics that are in your packet now are intended to be the final graphics in the adopted code. Building height is the third main component in terms of the mixed-use building regulations and lot regulations. We've added a diagram in again. If there is a lot that has a change in elevation, an indication of how to measure that, so it's clear for everybody. Then we have just the familiar graphics that indicate sort of the minimum build-out and maximum build-out that could occur between the lot standards, the building height, lot coverage, having that in for an informational graphic. And then the last component of the mixed-use district is obviously identifying the uses. And one of the changes we've done there, the first time you saw this, they were split out into three different tables for permitted uses, conditional uses, and special review uses. We've now combined that into one table.
Didn't we have some adjustments to that?
So,
Okay.
Yep, and we come back and go through some of that. So then, again, the same thing within the residential, proposed riverfront residential district. We have lot standards. We have building placement information with the associated diagrams. We have building height information. And then we have the use table for the residential district. And then Article 3 is the development standards. And there were the 6 different areas of the development standards: the building, site, landscaping, lighting, parking, and signs. So 2 other things to note that won't be within the Title 17 information is one, if you recall in the first work session, we talked about amendments to the floodplain regulations to better accommodate some of the mixed-use development. So we're working on those amendments, and those will actually be in the ordinance that would come before you, and that's where the language for those amendments would be. And then the second component is we talked a little bit last time, I think it was last time, about some of the bicycle parking and amending that. Right now in our code, there's really sort of 1 or 2 bullets that address bike parking in the community, and it reads rather confusing, and so we thought it'd be best to actually just amend that little bit of information in the parking section of our current code. So that's Chapter 28 of Title 17. So those are 2 items that are coming forward as part of this effort, but will be part of the ordinance and is not part of the new Chapter 18. So, opening it up.
Do you want to proceed with just questions, or do you want to start at the beginning and go through each sign? And
Sign.
yeah, so the feather sign versus the standards for feather signs, standards for, or just want to?
Or if we could we start with the lot standards information? So that information first and save the sign conversation for after that? Because I want to make sure we're getting through, if there's any comments or questions yet within that, it'd be great to excuse me, start that and go through that
Okay,
first.
so let's start at the lots.
So actually, I'll back up to so one of part of this, in terms of the framework plans, part of the conversation in the first session and the second session was deciding where to show the mixed-use district and where to show the residential district. And based on some of the input at the last meeting, we actually extended the mixed-use district to the area, if I can get the So before, we had this area here on the framework plan as residential, and based on the input that we received, we've modified that to be mixed use as well along the riverfront. And it's the mixed use B area versus C because it has river frontage. And if you recall, we had calibrated the language to specifically address parcels that have river frontage and then some of the parcels that don't have river frontage. So that's how we amended the framework plan for the mixed use.
Okay, Councilmember Meisner?
As part of that whole conversation, we also had questions about north side versus south side. Go ahead.
Right. So what we ended up doing in terms of, based on the input from the last meeting and sort of to clarify things, we extended the mixed-use district, and so all of the mixed-use district language in the framework plan is meant to be applied north of the river. And then we're still accommodating the residential areas south of the river, and we've calibrated that in terms of retaining the commercial area along South 9th as well as the existing residential area, but allowing for that residential to still occur south of the river.
Dina, do you have a map that shows that all together?
I didn't combine the two for this round.
It would help me to have that visual.
To have the combined map.
Mm-hmm.
And we can send that out to folks.
Just
So generally, the mixed use, so just to orient everybody, First Street is on the left here. 9th Street is coming through this area right here. This is 11th Street on the east. And sort of if 11th would be extended, we just extended that down to the river. What you're looking at on this particular graphics, you can see the railroad tracks coming in and creating sort of this triangular shape here. That's the existing, some of the existing industrial areas within the south side of the river. And so that's the area I just mentioned we wanted to exclude and retain those existing uses, as well as the existing commercial along South 9th. So when I switch slides, you'll notice that the residential areas are coming up basically in this area and a little bit down in this area. So if I go to that, that's that map. So we're retaining those existing industrial areas and the commercial along South 9th, but allowing for potential for some of that riverfront residential to come in within 500 feet of the edge of the floodway, which is the language that we were using in the last round as well.
And that orange,
We added the hatch because we also did testing. We know that we're intending to have color graphics in the code, but we know inevitably things are going to get copied in black and white. And so in terms of readability testings, we added the hatch.
okay, but what is that zoning again?
So that's per the framework plan where the riverfront residential is intended to be applied.
So what is currently there now? I can't think, is it just open land?
Some of it is vacant, some of it is existing residential. So again, we're not changing the zoning map, we're creating the tool in the toolbox.
Right.
And by virtue of identifying the framework plans,
Sure.
saying this is ideally based on the purpose and intent statements where we would like to see this applied in the community in support of the Arkansas River Corridor Master Plan.
Eventually, yes.
Hamrick?
I'll take, we already know that when some people look at that map, it's going to be offensive to them because they believe that we're changing the zoning on their property now. So we just need to be cognizant of that. I don't know how we get around that and still try to do some planning, but we need to be really careful with not keeping secret maps, but at the same point in time, trying to communicate that it's visionary.
Well,
Which didn't work last time, but.
Not
maybe
only
with this-
visionary, but it only comes into effect if and when they choose to come to the city and ask for it to take effect.
Correct.
And to be adopted. So that's based on their initiative. And butting up to your comment too, that there is absolutely no conversation of eminent domain happening with the riverfront zone changes.
That's easy to say
We are
until you
not
look at that map. And
talking about eminent
when
domain.
John Doe looks at that map, they immediately think eminent domain. I don't care what you tell them, what you talk, but when
So-
you look at the map, that's what comes out.
You just kind of change the conversation and you say, hey, if you want this zoning, you have to come to us and ask for it. We're not going to offer it to you. And then when they look at it that way, they go, oh, well, okay, I get it. You just change the conversation, that's all.
Well, you weren't afforded the opportunity to change that conversation last time we had this on this issue. And it doesn't work that easy.
So can we attach on the map clear and decisive language explaining?
I mean, it's just a challenge.
It just,
I know,
but
but
it
if it's
helps.
there, if it's one more step towards saying,
I
this is our intention, you, like Jerry said, you have to come to us in order to change this. We will not do this for you.
I'm not sure what verbiage works best in terms of just trying to communicate that, I mean, you were there, that how do you communicate that it's visionary, and that's it?
It needs to be in
But
layman's terms.
People look at it.
It needs to be in.
Well, it's
in-
beyond visionary. This is a choice that you can make and choose to have initiated on your own. So you
Right,
can,
right.
please just find that best wording and add it in there.
Yeah, and we have some language in here, so we'll take a look at that and see if we need to amend it a little bit to be more clear.
But put it
John-
on the
Yeah.
map.
So John had
On
a
the
comment
page of the
too.
map. On the page.
We'll try to reformat.
Yeah,
that.
or
Got it.
an asterisk, or some kind of side note, or, you know what I mean?
Got it.
All right, John's turn.
So Nina, if you go back to the previous map. Thank you. So if we're looking at, now I've got to get there too. So if we're looking at the piece of property bounded by Water Street and Industrial Avenue that's in the pink cross state hatched, which is riverfront mixed use. Okay, that's in that general area there. Yeah, perhaps by Vine Street, between Water Street and Vine Street. We do have existing buildings in that area, and so this is not really blank slate time, because we do have some existing buildings. And we've talked about it here a little bit, but explain how we manage change there. So if you have a building and you want to change use, you still have to request this zoning to activate these rules. Is that correct? Did I get that right?
Well, if they don't want to rezone to riverfront zoning, and they're just changing a use within their building under their existing zoning, the riverfront zoning does not come into play.
Thank you. And so that's basically how this truly is something that's optional, but it is electable. Perhaps you can make that election, that choice to have this zoning apply to your property, which and what our hope is that choice will increase property values, will increase the value of any structures constructed in accordance with these standards and provide a quality experience for both residents, business owners, and the users of those areas.
Any other questions about the maps and the discussion that we've been having? Okay, can you take us to the next section?
Okay, so then Article 2 is the districts and regulations, and again, we'll start with the riverfront mixed-use area. And if you recall, based on the framework plan, again, we've calibrated some of the standards based on looking at the existing kind of typical lot sizes and configurations that exist within those different districts, and they're all very different, so we're trying to accommodate that. And then, as I've previously mentioned, the mixed-use A and mixed-use B both have some property that abut the river, so we needed to make sure we have regulations that address that, whereas MUC does not abut the river, and so we have to make sure we're addressing conditions for that. So I don't, in terms of any of the lot standards, we haven't changed that from our last configuration. The diagram you see here is just an illustrative talking about minimum and maximum lot coverage. The building placement regulations, the one thing we modified here, if you recall from the first session, we were toying with the idea of using top of bank as a measurement, and we were able to remove that and talk about the setbacks from the easement, because in terms of a future public easement for the Riverwalk. So that's been clarified to not have confusion in terms of trying to determine where is top of bank. So that's been simplified. Other than that, I think most of everything else has stayed the same. In terms of building height, again, we didn't really change anything. We may have massaged language, particularly in the last row there, just in terms of trying to be more clear on rules of measurement and increasing the floor plate for rooftop access and things like that. So the intent didn't really change. We may have just clarified the language a bit.
Dina, is this a
Yep.
okay time to ask about some of the development standards and guidelines for the buildings itself?
We'll get into that.
Okay.
So we're still in Article 2.
Okay. Anyone have questions so far? Okay.
So then in the use table, some of the comments that had come in the earlier sessions were concerns about some of the uses that we were showing as allowed and how they might be too much for what we want in the riverfront area. And I mentioned at that time that what we were doing is we were trying to use some of our existing definitions, but maybe creating a limited category. And so that's how we've handled a lot of them here, so that there was some consistency back with existing definitions in Title 17. And I think the trade or repair shop that you see towards the bottom of the table there, we've amended that definition. So in any case where you see definition, comma, limited, we've taken an existing definition within the code and calibrated it to what we thought was appropriate for the riverfront area. So for example, allowing some types of maker spaces and things like that without getting into really noxious, heavier, more intense industrial uses.
I have a question, Dina, and I'm supposing this is probably standard for the other communities that you've worked for and have studied, but people downtown often say, there's too many service businesses and such, and that there should be more retail and restaurants. Is that a similar argument that would need to be made on the riverfront? I mean, what's the right balance?
Right, and so we've addressed that a bit in terms of, I'm trying to get an example to point out. I think where's off? So professional offices would be a good example of that, where we don't really want those offices to be on the ground level right on our most active part of the riverfront. We really want that to be reserved for retail and restaurants. So that's an example where we've noted that, hey, you can have offices in that area, but above ground floor only.
Okay.
Right? So we've taken that into account in the table.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the use table for the mixed-use district? Okay. So then moving into the riverfront residential, again, we have the lot standards. I think the change that you see here is not necessarily some of the sizes, but more so the language being used. We want to make sure we're tying back to the existing code. I think before we were using duplex, or I don't recall the exact language, but we wanted it to be more similar to what the existing code language is in terms of single family, two family, et cetera. So those have been updated. We also realized, I think, that we were missing, not in this table, but one of the other tables addressing some of the single family. So again, the idea here generally is that these are small lot residential developments, so that we're getting more people living and walking near and along the riverfront. So they're smaller lots, but we're still accommodating a multifamily building to come in as well. And the one key thing that we have added and clarified in terms of the language from the existing code is adding in row home as a type to specifically address row homes. So the graphic that you see on the far right there, so we're distinguishing between a single family lot where you have 4 individual walls and have some side yard setbacks, to a 2-family or a duplex, and then row homes is 3 or more attached, but typically those are platted fee simple, so the ownership goes all the way down and you have an individual lot like you may or may not on a 2-family. And also opposed to multifamily, which is often one lot with multiple units on. So then we have the diagrams again in terms of building placement and the setbacks. And if you recall in the last session, we talked about courtyard development as one type of small lot development. So we've actually included a diagram specifically for courtyard development and how they need to apply setbacks for that. Again, we have the building height information. Again, here we probably clarified the language a little bit in terms of how to identify that floor plate, and then added the diagrams in to help folks understand how that should get applied. And then we have the use table for residential. And again, we had separate tables before. We've combined that to one table for ease of use. So we're still, in this case, we're still allowing most things that you see in our residential districts currently. We're allowing for those home occupations, and added in the row home specifically to say that that's a permitted use. And then the other thing that we did, if you recall from the first session, the top 2 lines there, we've split out accessory structure and accessory use into 2 separate definitions because in our current code they're in one category, but they're 2 very different things.
Yeah.
Yep.
Back on that list, I thought we had some conversations around modular homes.
Yep, that was a comment last time. So we still have modular in as a permitted use. Honestly, I don't even think it should be in as a use. It's a construction type. And so I guess it's, what are the thoughts in terms of having that in?
Well, I think if there is a modular home, there needs to be some standards to it so it maintains the integrity that we're wanting to develop in the riverfront.
Mm-hmm.
Not only the integrity, but the wear. I mean, a stick-built home is going to last much longer than a modular home.
So modular homes are often basically a stick-built house that's just built in pieces and brought to the site.
That technology is changing daily,
It's, yeah.
Okay,
for the better.
okay.
Let me ask
It's-
a question. I don't see anyone, maybe I missed it. What about, because they're starting to do that, and I know Pueblo's dealing with it, pre-structured homes. In other words, they're built off-site and they're brought and put on the location. That's not a modular home, that's a
You mean the
pre-constructed
tiny
home.
homes? The
No,
tiny homes, or,
Full-size homes now.
so we,
Is that the same?
You're talking
It's-
about factory-built homes?
Yes, factory-built homes.
so there's the sort of a technical difference between, say,
I know, but
a
do
mobile.
we have a place for them in what we're doing on the riverfront?
So the modular,
It's not going to be a modular.
well, yeah, there's
So
sort
I
of
don't
the
know if we,
definitions
I
between
don't know if we need to look at
manufactured
it, but I
and-
just thought I'd bring it up because that's
Yeah.
starting to come about.
I
Let-
think what you're
let's-
trying to get at, Frank, is that if it has wheels attached to it when it comes in, you want to question that. These new modulars coming in are certified. They come on, they pick them up and stick them on there. And and then there's the home that can be built in pieces. We have some of those in town that were put here in the 70s. But if it came in with a frame and the wheels attached to it, that's a manufactured home. A modular is one that literally is stick-built someplace else, put on the truck, the crane
I
picks it
know
up,
that.
puts
I'm
it on.
talking about, they're building manufactured homes now in
Right.
some places and sending them to cities, okay?
I guess I didn't-
I just want to make sure, if we're looking for things for the future,
Sure.
then it's also looking
I
at
get it.
that.
Oh, I thought you were against that because that's a slippery.
No, I'm not against it, but I'm
Okay.
just saying,
I-
where do
what-
we look at placing it,
And,
so
yeah.
we're ready for that.
Absolutely. That's a slippery slope. I
Yeah.
think you got to be careful.
It
No,
is,
I
because
don't
I
have a
didn't
problem with
quite
that.
understand
So,
the
okay,
definition, so.
Because they're saying they can build them cheaper than, most contractors can build them. Well, that's what they're saying. But anyway, as long as we take care of it.
Are there any
Yeah,
other
no.
comments? Catherine, do you have something to say?
Well, so I think kind of what Dina was saying is that, unless you're going to have specific regulations for the modular, it's just a single-family dwelling. And so calling it out in particular in the table doesn't really make any sense, I guess, is what I'm saying.
and I think that was a carryover from the current code.
Oh, okay.
So
But,
technically, it can be taken out.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, I would just
I
treat
think I would
any
prefer that.
manufactured home, and we don't need to go into the differences of everything, but as a single-family dwelling, whether it's stick-built or it's manufactured, or, unless you want to do something different, so.
Does it have to, a modular home in this instance, would it have to adhere, I'm guessing it has to adhere to all the outside surface areas so that it looks and matches with everything else, since you wouldn't know the difference?
That would be the intent, yes. That they're made in pieces, so they're either the walls or modules, or the whole homes, if it's a tiny home, say, coming on site. It's the main difference is, whether it's on wheels or not on wheels, and how it's put on a permanent foundation. We're wanting everything here to be on a permanent foundation. There are plenty of examples of modular homes that were built off-site and brought on-site that I would say look much better than some of the on-site stick-built homes that I see. So it's a matter of it's just a matter of the individual developer.
Right, but there are also modular homes that have been coming into Gold Canyon, and some companies that have been trying to come into Dawson Ranch, and they are not better than the houses that are there. They are considered by the neighborhood or the HOAs to be of less value. And so I want to really be careful that we maintain the right standards that we want in this really special area.
So maybe that's something we need to take a better look at, the development standards for the residential area in terms of building.
Dina, I have one question, several questions. We've talked about the floodplain and all that, and of course, being on the river, and you're talking about foundations, are we pretty much eliminating any kind of basements or any kind of crawl space, or what's the limitations on that?
So from a residential standpoint, it needs to be raised above the floodplain, right?
Right.
There's the regulations on raising above floodplain. for the occupied space. You know, a lot of these, you could see potentially somebody building if it's the row home, let's say it's a series of row homes, so small lots, the ground level might just be parking, right? And that might be in the floodplain, but by virtue of having the ground level of that unit being parking, the living space is already elevated above the floodplain.
That's what I mean, for like storage or garages or something like that, they can get away with that, perhaps? Not saying get away, but,
Right, it's not occupied space,
right,
yeah,
So
in terms
they-
of where people are living or sleeping.
right. So as long as they're living in the space above the floodplain, then it's okay, I guess.
It's elevated above the
Right,
floodplain. Yep.
okay. All right.
Jerry, did you have a comment that you would like to make?
It was exactly what you were saying, is that some modular homes look exactly like manufactured homes. You can't tell the difference. They're just constructed a little different. I think that was your point.
Okay. Any other comments at this time? Okay.
Okay, so then moving into the development standards, so Article 3. So we'll start with, just in order, and go through these: building, site, landscape, lighting, parking, and signs. Maybe I don't have those slides in here. Thought I
So
did.
wait, I'm sorry, Dina.
Yep.
Back to that other slide. Are we just going to remove?
Yeah, we'll take out the modular.
Okay. I
Is
think that would
language?
just clear things up a
Yep,
little bit.
yep,
Okay.
we'll remove that
I just
from the
wanted
use
to
table.
clarify before we moved on.
Yep.
Well, I don't know if we did clarify that. Was it, we want, because you were saying some modulars, it's new technology, things are getting
Well-
even
But
better.
it's considered
I
as
think the thing, and Jerry may help, I think that the area of construction that's changed the most significantly in the last 5 years is modular or off-site construction. And that is getting high-tech. I mean, they are building some high-tech homes that are essentially
Right.
puzzle homes that they build off-site, they bring on-site, which is the problem they're potentially having locally, is they're bringing those homes off-site and putting them together, and you can't compete with it construction-wise, but they're still quality homes.
So-
And I was going to, the upcoming work session in December on housing, I was going to bring some images in of modular housing and examples of that at different densities to talk through that. But yes, there's been significant advances in terms of, you know, SIPs, structurally insulated panels, is
Right.
one component that are manufactured. And so there's a couple of reasons why modular is really taking off. It's labor shortages. It's having more certainty and quality assurance in a warehouse setting or manufactured setting versus necessarily on site, which also helps in terms of some of the review and approval processes. So there's more certainty there. You can build more into more inclement weather and then bring them on site. And just with labor shortages, it's the home building industry in the United States, you know, the traditional sort of single-family detached home really hasn't changed much since post-World War II. And this increase in what's happening in terms of modular or just off-site construction and bringing it on-site is really starting to take off.
Jerry, did
That's-
you have a comment?
Yeah, I just want to, that's very true. There are really cool modular companies out there, but your average Clayton home is 2 pieces, looks just like a manufactured home, and it's sat on a lot. It doesn't come in wheels and doesn't have a VIN number, but you couldn't tell the difference between modular and manufactured unless you crawl under the house. So in our area, when we say modular, 90% of them are Clayton homes, 2 pieces, sat on a foundation, not the cool things you're talking about. So that's where we need clarification.
Sure. So we can, and again, I think going back to what I mentioned at the beginning, that really shouldn't even be in as a use. It's a construction type, right? So it shouldn't necessarily have its own row in the use table. That was sort of a carryover. You know, when we started identifying uses for the riverfront residential, we looked at our existing residential districts in the community, and so that's sort of a carryover from that.
Well, and I think in having this discussion, a really important element is what are these things, how are these all defined in the code? I think we all have our own definitions in our head, but they may not match what's in the code, because a manufactured home in the code is basically a HUD certified home, like a mobile home, with a permanent foundation. A modular is a state certified home. And so, and those are very common distinctions. So I think we probably, if we want to dig further into this, we need to mine those definitions or alter those definitions if necessary.
Right, well, because according to our current definitions now, those houses that tried to go into Gold Canyon would be those kind of subpar modular homes. They under the city's zoning standards, they were allowed, but they're not exactly what we really necessarily wanted in that part of that area of town.
But that's half the story. You have covenants there. The city, so, no, wait, this is a moot point. What he's arguing is that your covenants up there, and the covenants say on-site build. He is thinking assembling on-site. And that's what he's fighting in court. And he's wrong, in my opinion. He's wrong. So if you were to link that with that and an architectural control committee, it's built one out in the golf course area. There's an architectural control committee. And they could have said no.
Right.
So there are other parameters around it, but blatantly, this individual, I think, is breaking the rules, and he knew he was doing it.
I just want to make sure that we protect this riverfront zoning, so.
But you've got to be
right, today
careful.
might not be the day.
You've got to,
Yeah.
he had qualified for a building permit. If you want this next step, your discussion on housing will be pertinent for this, because you could have covenants linked with an architectural control committee. I did that in other places I built, and they're the ruling part. There was no architectural control committee. That wouldn't have gotten by. That's my opinion.
Dolly?
So, back to John's statement about this being a clean slate. Let's make sure we get this right. Let's have a discussion later about this, because I think there's some valid points on both ends.
Okay, and I think it does need to be a conversation at another time.
Yeah.
So for now, I think we're still, we're going to remove that modular from the use table. We can definitely have further conversations about clarifying those definitions and what they mean for the community. And I would also say that if there was a desire to maybe come back in the future and add more design standards in the residential section, after we've had that holistic conversation around the different types of construction, then that could get added in. Does that make sense?
But before the adoption.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Or potentially before adoption. So let's move into building then. I just have this as a summary slide. If we wanted to go through any of the specific comments or language that's in the packet, we can do that. So is there anything in the building section of Article 3? And in your packets, that began on 15? Page 15.
Page what?
So remember, we talked through in one of the sessions about having the minimal transparency along the riverfront, along those key frontages, and that's why we have the framework plan, is to identify those key frontages and what's really the front. And so when you have riverfronting land, we want that to be a key frontage and really have that fenestration, being able to see into the building, to see that activity that's going on along the riverfront. So I don't think we did any real changes to the regulations that were originally talked through at the earlier meetings. So it talks about minimum transparencies on the ground level. We, from a material standpoint, in the mixed-use district, we want to make sure that on that ground level, we are not having EFS at the ground level. It gets beat up way too easily. And if we're trying to create a unique environment here, trying to have it look nice for the general public and for visitors that may come, we're not allowing EFS to be on the ground level. So that's one specific regulation that we've identified from, say, a material standpoint or a look standpoint from the mixed-use district. I think, at least leading into this, staff's approach has been more hands-off on the residential side of things. But if we want to add more teeth into the residential side of things, we can do that. So were there any questions on the building standards? Yeah?
So on the ephes and the stucco, anything above 36 inches, you can put that material. Just anything below that.
Right, it gets beat up. I know we don't get a lot of snow here, but when it does snow, and if people are using salt to clear sidewalks and things like that, it really beats on the ephes on the ground level. If people did have irrigation systems, that can eat away on it. And just if there's, say, walkways adjacent to or outdoor cafes adjacent to that material, it just doesn't wear very well.
Okay. So what would be an alternate?
So
I know.
using
it's
different types
probably-
of masonry, so either brick or block.
Okay.
Are there any other questions or comments on the mixed-use building standards? So then, let's see, where are we here? Do we have anything? I don't think we have anything in.
Roofing?
So, Councilwoman Smith, so in terms of the riverfront residential for building standards right now, those are on page 17. Under the graphic, that graphic is the last graphic for the mixed-use area, is two very basic regulations for the riverfront residential. So if that's an area where you wanted to add some additional language in, that's where we would add it in. Okay. So then moving on to the next category, which is the site regulations. So we have, again, we're starting with, all of these are organized with the mixed-use district regulations first, and then the residential regulations. So under general site, that starts on page 18. And some of the elements that we are addressing there, for example, is we know that there may be opportunities based on the type of development that may come in the future. There may be some structured parking associated with these developments, and so we're trying to stipulate that those parking structures and parking lots, for that matter, in a different section, aren't necessarily the first thing that you see the building first. So we have some basic parameters about where that alignment of the parking should be in conjunction with the occupied space of a building. We talk a bit about access and loading. We address outdoor cafes, the allowance of and outdoor cafes. And then have a section that specifically talks about that encroachment, and based on the setbacks that we've identified, particularly on the riverside, as you can see on the illustration, that by virtue of the setbacks that we've identified for buildings facing the riverfront, folks could have some of their outdoor cafe on their private property. They could have it entirely on their private property if they wish so, and or they could come in and ask for a sidewalk cafe permit, similar to what businesses do now on Main Street. So we're showing how that outdoor cafe can encroach and spill into the future Riverwalk. In terms of the site regulations for residential, remember we talked a little bit about, these are small lots. This was more so if there was river frontage. We don't have river frontage per se anymore, but some of these lots might be developed at the edge of the floodway. And so we're still accommodating the understanding that the front door might be the same entry point as is the garage, and we just want the front door to be clear from that public street.
Dina?
Yep.
It's maybe in the right place, but on outdoor cafes, you're mentioning no composite materials. 18.
Page 18. So, yeah, so that's the materials for either, say, the fencing or the tables and chairs themselves. Again, we're just looking for more durable types of materials that create that sense of place along the riverfront. Also, a lot of those plastic fiberglass and composites are very lightweight and have a tendency to blow away much easier. So by not allowing those, hopefully we're having more sturdy outdoor cafe things that aren't blowing into our river.
But a lot of composites aren't lightweight, too.
I mean, if that's something you'd like us to remove, we can remove
Well, I
that
don't know.
from a.
I mean, what's that TRX stuff? Isn't it? I mean, that's a standard deck fencing material that you're talking about potentially eliminating that's intended specifically for that purpose. Is it not?
Correct.
Yeah, that.
But-
Well, you use it for decking.
But if
Decking
it's,
fence, they make
use it
fencing.
for fences. Yeah, I know, you're not, that would be anchored.
yeah, if it's anchored down inside of concrete,
If it's anchored or was used for decking, it's usable.
Well, it says you can't use it. Doesn't matter if
Right,
it's
so,
anchored.
right now, we are not allowing composite materials, so we can remove that from the list.
or add that it's anchored down somehow with bolts or concrete or,
Then you have
to do Yeah.
engineering studies
Yeah, I thought we,
get the permits.
do we really have to?
I mean, this is part of that process where I realize we're trying to draw on a blank slate, but we need to be careful with what we're limiting here. I just don't like composite. I mean, that's a whole realm of materials that, particularly for outdoor use, if you're having an outdoor use material, it's probably going to be composite.
so do we want it, so we remove composite from the list? Is that the consensus?
Couldn't you just add no lightweight composite materials? If you're worried about the aspect of it blowing into the river, that would potentially eliminate that issue.
Yeah, I thought we had some language about, in terms of the issue with things blowing away, but I'm not recalling.
I mean, if you take number C
yeah.
into consideration, it addresses your issue about things blowing around. Item C says that they got to be secured.
Right, but, and so maybe the composite is a little bit different than the plastic and fiberglass, but it's also about the sense of place that we're trying to create along the riverfront. And I guess, you know, ideally, if there's outdoor cafes there, that maybe they have metal chairs instead of plastic chairs that tend to, you know, bleach very easily in our Colorado sun and things like that. So it gets a little bit to sense of place and character we're trying to create.
Can I make a comment?
You got to be careful about telling people everything that they can do. Go ahead, Frank.
This is a combined council and planning meeting. Even if we as a council do this clean slate here with stuff here, I haven't really heard a lot from the planning commission, because even when we're done, when somebody wants to put something on the riverfront, guess what? Where's it going to go to? The planning commission, okay? So, you know, I'm not saying that you folks haven't been paying attention, because you have. But what I'm wanting to hear is chime in on stuff that we're bringing up that we feel might possibly be a problem or work for a solution. Because, like I said, when we're done, it's going to go to you folks before it gets out there. You're going to have meetings with somebody that wants to build something in that area. So you are the ones that also, you know, have a part in this. So if you got something to say, please say it.
So any other thoughts on the composite material or other materials?
Yeah, So my question is, we're saying what you can't do there. What does that leave that you can do there? Wood, metal, and that's it, right?
Right, so A talks about only durable metal exterior furnishings and fencing railings are permitted.
So it's wood or metal, and then as it reads now, no plastic, fiberglass or composite.
Is that part of creating a common theme and atmosphere that we're trying to create down there?
Correct.
Is that instead
Yep.
of having a modge podge of?
Well, you got to be careful that we don't create this world that nobody can build in or live in. I mean, we got to be practical.
And I would
don't
say-
see this as being practical in some of these things.
I have heard from a property owner along the riverfront that said he didn't want it to be open up to anything, that he wanted it to be really special and high quality. So
I don't disagree, but there's a point here where we,
So there is a fine balance. And again, I would remind everybody that this is literally, in terms of the mixed-use area, we're talking about less than 1% of the entire land area within the city, trying to make it a really unique and special place.
I don't care if it's
And-
1/100%. The people that are going to be there in that position, you're being overly restrictive, I believe.
let's hear from some other council members or commissioners on your feelings.
So the idea is we don't want plastic chairs blowing in the river in a windstorm. We want everything to look nice. Is there a current code on what kind of fencing you can put on Main Street around your front of your establishment right now? Does it have to be metal?
I don't
Or
think there
wood?
is.
Like, you can't put up orange temporary fence on posts dug into the sidewalk, right? That wouldn't be allowed. So the idea is that any fencing you put on a patio and any patio furniture is just durable and stable.
I mean, I have a problem with mandating that it's durable and stable and fixed, but, to come out and say that it can't be fiberglass or composite, and as our world changes, those are two significant factors that are relative to construction,
So
and
how,
are going to be more significant in the future.
so what would your verbiage be? How would you change it to make it fit the mold that you want to see?
Just read item C, that's what we're talking about.
We could just
So
strike
take out
B.
B
We can
and just leave C.
I mean,
Yeah,
we want it.
but does that mean as long as it's secure, it's okay if it's incredibly ugly?
That's subjective.
Well,
Well, I have to say, that's been kind of my thoughts. First of all, I'm rather new, and I'm really learning a lot as we go. I'm taking so much in. I love what I hear so far, all the hard work that's been done. But as I'm watching this whole thing getting ready to bloom, to blossom, I am picturing this really beautiful, high-quality area that we're not used to around here, that's going to have those, what I think of as the covenants, so to speak, your regulations. And if I was coming in and going to drop an awful lot of money into this on my own accord, I would hope that my neighbor next to me is going to afford the same quality and bringing it in here. And so I'm kind of hoping that that's the direction we can go, so it doesn't have a really cheap look over here, but we have the highest quality here. I'd love to see that uniformity. It is so refreshing to go to a community that has gone for that look, and I think we all get excited when we think we're going to go to the new areas of Vail or to Breckenridge where they're doing things right and stuff. That's what I'm picturing. I'm not picturing the bottom dollar, the bottom dollar things that they're going to be putting into place. Do you have to use the verbiage of something like very high quality, secured? I don't know. I mean, I can see what you're talking about and over-regulating, but there again, if I was putting in millions of dollars and I'm excited about this new look for Canyon City, I would be willing to put in that is made of stone or metal or cement or, high quality. So that's just my chiming in.
It's good to hear from the commissioners. Thank you. Randy?
And on the other end, a composite, I think we're missing the definition of a composite versus wood, which will deteriorate after a while, no matter if it's treated or not. Now, if you Google it, which I just did, composite construction is often used in building aircraft, watercraft, building construction, several reasons to use it because it increases strength, aesthetics, and environmental sustainability. So it'll be there a lot longer than us putting up a cedar post or something like that. So if we look at the construction of it, I think composite should be considered one of our major options if we want it to last and if we want it to look good and if we want it to basically sustain over the riverfront over a long period of time. So I don't think we are to disregard composite materials just because of the name.
Other comments, please?
I think what Councilmember Meisner is after is that we talk about being pro-business and then we highly regulate everything. It makes it harder to be pro-business if there's so many restrictions.
But remember, we're talking about a patio and patio furniture. So,
Well, also decking. And I happen to have a composite deck, and it's lasted a lot longer than the actual joists and the beams underneath, which I'm probably going to have to replace in the next few
This is under
years.
outdoor cafes.
yeah, this is furnishings and fencing and railings.
So are we saying we shouldn't have a composite fence?
Well, I'm based on the comments I'm hearing, it sounds like folks are open to adding composite in as a material for fencing
Right,
and for
right.
the fixtures.
That would be fine, just not plastic chairs, right? That's what
Yeah.
we're, yeah.
I mean, part of what we're trying to get away from is the stack of 20 white plastic chairs, you know,
Blowing around in the
15
middle of the
stack
night
of
when no
them,
one's
yeah.
there, yeah.
out there on the patio.
Well, but I think earlier when we talked about section C where it talks about it being secured, it wouldn't necessarily have to be a white plastic chair. It could be a brown plastic chair, and it would look attractive, and some of the composite chairs are just as strong as those. I'm not sure how to, at this point, get around the composite issue. We probably should chew that a little bit, and that should, as recommended, that would probably be something we would do at the Planning Commission, is chew that down a little bit and discuss that, because composite materials are used more and more every day, like Jim said, and they look very attractive in a lot of places. I agree, we don't want a bunch of white plastic chairs stacked up in the corner of any cafe, but we have to get around that.
Brian, you haven't said anything yet tonight. I'd like to hear from you if you don't mind.
Yeah, I think the intent is for a nice feature. So, I mean, obviously, plastic and fiberglass should remain. The easy way to do it is require metal chairs. Doritos has great metal chairs. I just had dinner there. I mean, that's nice. It exists, common material, common furniture feature for an outdoor cafe. For commonality, just require metal chairs, metal features. Call it good. I get composites are coming down the line, fine, but we're creating a space. Designate that.
So are we going to section the chairs away from the rest of the furnishings? That's a thought. And the reason I mention that is because a composite table could be substantially heavy and anchored properly and would look nice. The chair is going to be our issue.
So I'm hearing to allow for composite materials, and still somehow have language requiring metal chairs. Is that a synopsis?
I don't know if we need to restrict ourselves to metal chairs if there's other heavy materials out there as well.
I think we need to do a little research on this. and
I just don't
Yeah.
think we need to
Let's do a
get
little bit more research
chairs
and
from Walmart.
Find out.
Okay. We will take a look at that, number 7.
Yeah, let's all of us do a little bit of more homework on that.
Yes, looking at other areas and their requirements.
Well, and
What does Vail say about That's their, what I'd like their to chairs? know. What does Aspen say about their chairs and their patio furnishings?
I can tell you this, Vail has composite materials on their patio.
Sure, so what do they say? What do
Right.
they say about those
I know they do.
composite materials?
Well, that's why I said a little
Let's,
more research.
yeah,
would probably
let's
help
look
us
at that
a little.
Let's do
and
it.
go from there.
Let's find
Okay.
out some more.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Okay, so,
I'm leaving at 8 p.m.
let's see, we backed up a bit. I mentioned the visibility of the front door from a site plan standpoint. The next section to talk through is the landscaping, fencing, and screening, and that starts on page 20. So the idea here is just, again, just getting some sort of very basic level standards in place to have landscaping and screening in this key riverfront area. So happy to just walk through any specific item that somebody has a question on or a comment. Silence. Okay, we'll move on. The riverfront residential, this is one area that has been amended from when it was first discussed. What we ended up doing is talking only about the front yard. So, right, the part that most of the general public sees, talking about the landscaping for the front yard, whereas before we had tried to address it with pervious and impervious surface with the entire lot. So we've removed that and simplified it to just the front yard. Then the next section is the lighting section. That starts on page 22. Again, I'll just, if there's any questions or comments on anything in that area.
How come no uplighting?
Just, again, trying to reduce sort of the night sky pollution and having a unique sense of place for the riverfront.
What does that, and I thought about that, is I like that, the one on the right all the way or something like that. Well, what does that do for safety? If someone wants to walk the river trail at night, and we're just talking about the developed area, what about on the trail? Or does that make a difference at all?
So if the city was installing, say, pedestrian fixtures in the future river walk, and they were designed with a full cutoff fixture, those are designed and spaced that, depending on where the light shines down in the end of that cone, they're spaced so there's a little bit of overlap in terms of the design. So when somebody is at, say, 5 feet or 6 feet level walking, they have adequate coverage of light.
So you'll often see those dual lights on a pole. You got one on each side. Those are down-facing lights, and so that would be a factor of giving it light. I wouldn't all agree with the splash of light coming out, but I think that's okay. Just wondered about that. Someone pedestrian being down there at night. So, okay.
Yeah, and a lot of times when, say, in larger developments that come in, if there's a parking lot that's designed as part of the development, one of the sheets that they usually submit is a photometrics sheet that tells you exactly, with little numbers on a plan, how the lighting hits the ground.
Yeah, okay.
Let's start at the end and work our way.
Me, Paula?
What's the
Paula?
end?
Paula,
I
it's
guess
the
it's
first
me.
one.
So, question, for the walkway then, because I was thinking the same as what you were talking about, Preston, are you thinking about some uniform pole lights, you know, like are along the frontages of beaches and so on, where there's the walkways? Is that in the plan? So there will be uniform every so many feet?
So that would be part of the riverfront planning and design work.
Right.
That's being done separate from this effort, right?
Okay.
This effort is all about if a private property owner wants to come in and ask to rezone
Right.
to riverfront mixed-use zoning, then this is what would apply to them.
Because I was, okay, I
That's
understand.
separate
Dina.
from a future river walk.
I was just trying to picture how the two mesh together,
Mhm.
what we're talking about for safety and walking down the path and so on. So, thank you.
Yep.
Kind of two questions. Those uplighting, the lights that are built in sidewalks, is that uplighting?
That is uplighting.
And lights that are intended to light flags is uplighting?
they could be designed to be downlit.
If it's going up, it's uplighting, right?
Correct.
And then, I'm not sure I understand the reasoning for the neon, other than what, it looks like a bar or something, or, I mean,
I guess just trying to eliminate certain types of light or illumination sources along the riverfront.
Are neon lights fluorocarbon now, or do they have LEDs in them? As far as the gas, it's a neon
both.
gas, I know.
It's still, it's just difficult to find somebody that knows how to do it.
Yeah.
To kind of pick up on the knee level or ankle level lighting, so that those would not be permitted on private, even if they're downcast, they would not be permitted?
So I heard, are you referring to the lights where somebody said in the ground? Or you're just talking about like pedestrian, very low level kind of walkway lights that residential?
Something raised above the ground, but designed to illuminate where you're putting your feet, essentially.
Yeah, those would be allowed as long as they're downlit.
As long as they're downlit.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Any questions down this way?
Oh, me, always.
Randy?
I'm getting involved.
Just one real quick. Is the old Constantino site, is this part of the plan that we're trying to make? Okay, the reason I brought that up is because in your deal with lighting on that old armory, boy, that light will blind you forever. And I can see why we don't want something going in it. That's the only thing.
Right. That's sort of the main purpose of the variations in the cutoff fixtures that have come into play over
But
the years.
remember, these have to be initiated by the landowner. That's already been initiated, even if it was down there.
Okay, Randy?
Sorry.
I'm not sure where this falls into which category, but as far as our safety concerns and we're having the down lighting, will we consider video cameras or some sort of call boxes that would be mounted on the lights? Everybody's going to have cell phones, I'm fine, but I still see call boxes in some of the other cities. Is it possible to maybe work that in there if we want the safety aspects of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're not disallowing those.
Okay.
So, yep.
And Jim?
So, just for clarification, I'm willing to bet that that Sprouts sign is a neon sign.
And I think those are individual, internally illuminated letters, cutout letters.
Yeah.
I think they are individual.
They're all LED
Looks-
now. They don't make neon anymore.
I know, I was going to say, you
Just in Pueblo.
The most important part of that sign is that we really need to have a Natural Foods in Canyon City.
So
Okay.
again, the intent, I mean, as you can see here with the entire lighting section, it's about a half a page for the mixed-use district and a half a page for the residential district. Okay, then on to parking. So as I mentioned, when we first broached parking, that basically the approach here in terms of the regulations is sort of a balance between the Main Street, where we don't have any off-street parking regulations, and the general commercial district in the city that have more onerous parking requirements. So the actual requirements that we've included in the table, the ratios, is sort of in between those two. And then the other things that we accommodated here is additional flexibility in allowance for off-site parking and shared parking. So, addressing things like car shares, that other cities have been dealing with for several years now. So just accommodating that. So say there was a multifamily building and they wanted to provide a couple of car share spaces for their residents, that they could do that, and that would help them reduce their parking requirement for the site. So those is sort of a summary of some of the things that we did in terms of parking requirements. So happy to, again, answer any specific questions.
Can I comment? We have to understand that in my business, I deal with commercial people. That's a fact. This is not going to be, this is going to be attracted to, the people that are going to be attracted to this get this. They're going to build that. They're not going to worry about a white plastic chair or something. They get it. They're going to have the best, I think. I just see when you go to lease somewhere, there's places they will not go. They're going to get this.
Well, they're going to
And
get it,
so-
and that's what they want. They don't.
And the other thing
yeah.
you got to understand is this is not going to be, you're not going to put a huge sign out to attract people off Highway 50. What's going to, the lighting and the signs and everything are in proportion to the pedestrian who's already there or the bicycle rider. I think an 8-foot feather flag is going to look too big. Think about it. You're walking on the river trail and you want to go to the cafe and there's an 8-foot. You don't need that. Maybe 6 feet. I'm not saying get away with it. Don't throw up your hands and run out of the building. But I think, look at your perspective that you're going to be on the river trail, you're going to be bicycling, you're going to be in a nice gravel path, and you look up, you go see this shop. You don't need a 10-foot sign to tell you eat at Joe's. That's what you got to, and the developer's going to do it, is going to get this. Or they're not going to develop there. It's not for everybody. So, I'll turn my mic off.
Preston, that's correct. We're maybe more concerned about the tenants following the rules too. So you can't always control what tenants you get, but you're absolutely right.
Some of these leases are pretty expensive.
Okay, any questions or comments on the parking section? All right, so page 24 has the tables for both the mixed use and for the residential. And then last section is signs. So I know there's lots of conversation around that. So we can just go page by page. If certain folks already know what they want to ask, we can do that.
Can I make a suggestion that, because a lot of us didn't have time to read through some of this beforehand, can you give us until the next session to read through this and bring back more pinpointed questions about signs? Because this meeting's already running long.
And I think there's going to be a lot of discussion.
And there's going to be a lot of discussion around signs.
So
If everybody, I don't know.
we can do that. We can bring that back. The intended schedule
I
coming
understand.
into the meeting tonight was to go to Planning Commission in 2 weeks at the October meeting with this material.
So next
So-
Wednesday, can we?
Well, we had that special meeting for stormwater. Can we tag this
Yeah.
onto it, or?
What is our timeline rush?
Earlier this year, council wanted to look at adopting riverfront zoning language with the current council that is seated, because that was one of your priorities. So we're trying to get this project done and have the second reading with the current council before
We have
the
to
end of the
start all
year.
over again?
Yep.
I do agree, but I think we can move around our stormwater.
I think it's more important that the content. Okay.
Or work around our stormwater.
I understand what our intention was, but at the same point in time,
So, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the sign piece is probably the most content. So, another option is we hold on the sign piece and keep the rest of it moving forward, and work in a future meeting on just the sign piece and have that go through the process separately.
Catherine, do you have a recommendation?
No, it's all about what you want to prioritize. And I understand going through the sign in a bit more detail, and I know you've been here for almost 2 hours, and you're probably.
well, I think the other thing is I'm willing to take this position as well, but we're talking about a different area, and that different area is going to require different restrictions and regulations, and that same concept is going to apply to the signs as it does to the plastic chairs. So I recognize that these signs are going to have different limitations than what we're going to have for the rest of the city. And I ask council to also consider that we're looking at trying to create an environment here.
So, but I'd just like to chime in and say, yeah, that sounds right. I think that we do need to keep what we can moving forward if we want to pull signs out of it, and, you know, or if there's something else that we need to pull out to have further discussions on. But I think that we've got we've had good discussion, we've had some good input. Science is going to be problematic, and you're right, we have to look really hard, because we could be creating a template that is not too palatable.
And I personally, I'm not knowledgeable enough about the verbiage here to speak intelligently about signs. But by next week, I could say, considering what we're trying to create, I don't have a problem with it. I just don't know. But I mean, if it's as restrictive and trying to accomplish with the signs as we have been with everything else, there's some of those things I don't like, but relative to what we're trying to do, that's what we need to do. I understand that.
And I think it's,
Oh,
Go
sorry,
ahead.
go ahead.
Go ahead.
If you didn't want to move your stormwater meeting next week, you could turn, I don't know what's on the planning commission agenda for the 23rd, right? Is that the right date? That you could turn that into a final joint session on signs.
what do you guys think about that?
I vote for that because I can't be here next week, and I want to be here.
I agree, let's dump it
I
on
can't
Sherry.
be here next week, so yes, for the planning commission for me. 23rd would be great.
Yeah, I mean.
For what day?
So
23rd?
Our planning commission is on the 23rd.
what we can do is we can have like a work session at the beginning, and then planning commission probably would have their regular meeting. I don't want to say you're not going to have a meeting because I don't know what's on the agenda. And we can place this on the agenda for planning commission to make a recommendation based upon the 4 work sessions that you've had, including the one they'll have that prior to that meeting. And they can decide at that time whether they're comfortable to make that recommendation. They can always table it and wait for another later meeting. So that's one option.
I think that's a good idea. I think the joint session is good because they don't talk a lot, and I think that's really good.
What?
But
What do you mean we don't talk?
We talk a lot in planning meetings.
Less is more.
I'm getting, and you have
The other way
80.
to look at this is Jerry, now
you
figure
have-
it out.
Yeah, now he's talking.
So will council participate on that that 23rd meeting?
Yeah, so it'll be a joint work session at the beginning, and then you
Yeah, I
can
think that's
stay
excellent.
and see what planning commission.
But
has.
in the meantime, we have some diligence on our part to kind of research
Yes.
other communities and maybe reaching out to the types of businesses that could potentially be out there and see what their expectations are. Because there is that special balance between being business friendly and where the type of business that we're wanting to attract and the environment we want to create in this really special area is that some of those businesses have those expectations for them, themselves and for their neighbors as a protection to their investments. And we need to make sure that we find that sweet spot and do that carefully.
Councilwoman?
I would just want to make one comment off of what Ashley just said. We've talked a lot about referring to other communities, other prominent communities. However, I want to make it very clear that we are not trying to become those communities. We're looking at ways to implement codes and standards into our community that will fit our unique Canyon City lifestyle. I just want to make that very clear.
Well, yeah, that's absolutely right. And maybe some of those comparisons need to be with more towns of our economic and size, but also realize too that we're kind of stubbornly stuck in a certain state of mediocrity, and this is a chance to kind of push the buttons up a little bit better.
I agree. I mean, the area we're talking about will be a more prominent area of our community, and I think it's appropriate to look at other prominent communities to get ideas, but not to become those communities.
Absolutely, we are definitely unique. Ryan, you had something to
So
say?
I just want to talk logistics for the 23rd.
You're just are you sweating? And
No, I just want to make sure we're all on the same page and we're expecting the same thing. On the 23rd, I think what Catherine is suggesting is a joint work session starting at 6 and then delaying the actual planning commission meeting until after the work session. Is that okay? Is everybody okay with that?
Well, it's just like Dina said, I'm sorry, we don't even know if we have an agenda for the planning
Well,
commission. so-
this is what's going to be on the agenda.
Well, I
for-
know, that's
yeah.
the joint, but we don't know
Right.
if there's going to be a, okay, yes.
Do we know
yes.
if we have anything on the docket?
I don't know if there's anything else right now.
Yeah, well, we can check on that and let you know. but-
Well, somebody better bring chocolate or something.
You
then.
guys might have to have a long meeting.
I'm good with that.
Sometimes Cindy provides some food for y'all, and that might be. a good-
Pizza.
Yeah, we can provide some dinner that night.
So, and then I would just ask, in terms of preparation, so the work session will focus on signs. If there's anything specific that you want more attention to, please let me know.
Well, signs and outdoor seating.
Right, but, and in terms of the sign section in
Oh,
particular, let me know what
So
parts
before-
of that.
Yeah, before we get too ready to go, do you have anything specific for Dina to guide her in being prepared with your questions on signs? Do you have
Or
anything?
send those to me in the next week.
Yeah, or send, so she knows she can come prepared. If you have any questions or concerns, let her know.
My suggestion would be to evaluate some of these areas that we're trying to replicate, but we're not trying to replicate, and see what their guidance is in terms of their patio stuff. Because I think that last time I was up in Vail, it was a little different than everybody's perception. It is a very nice area, but they also have a wide variety of things out there. So it would be nice to be able to see what kind of parameters some of those communities have in terms of plastic chairs.
And signs.
Got it.
Any other, so if anyone else has anything for Dina, please bring them to her before the 23rd so she can be prepared with our concerns and questions. Otherwise, we are adjourned.